She picked up a piece of jollof rice from the bin, dusted it, and blew on it before putting it in her mouth. Her grandson Nico saw her crouched behind the food tent. "Grandma, why are you eating trash?" he asked. His voice wasn't loud, but it reached every guest like a slap. And in that one moment, the music stopped. The laughter froze. Every face turned. The sun was shining brightly. Music was loud, and laughter filled the air at the grand family reunion. Everyone was dressed in their best clothes, taking pictures, dancing, and showing off. But little Nico, only 8 years old, wandered away from the crowd, looking for his grandmother, Zaloma. He missed her soft singing, the way she used to tell stories, and the warmth of her hug. As he walked behind the catering tent where food had been served earlier, he saw something that made him stop. There, sitting on the ground quietly, was Grandma Zaloma. Her hands were deep inside a black trash bag. She pulled out pieces of yam peels and quietly put them into her mouth. Her clothes were old and faded. Her eyes looked tired. Nico didn't understand. This was his grandmother, the one who used to cook for everyone, who used to sing lullabies when he couldn't sleep. Now, she was picking from the bin like a stranger with no home. He walked slowly toward her, his little voice full of confusion and love. "Grandma, why are you eating from the bin?" he asked gently. That one question, so simple, so innocent, felt like thunder. Somewhere the music stopped. People looked around, trying to see what happened. The dancing slowed. Plates were put down. Then silence. Zaloma didn't look up. Her hands stopped moving. But in that moment, her shame stood up tall. That soft question pulled open a door no one in the family wanted to open. The truth they had pushed away. The woman they had forgotten. The sacrifices they had buried. Some people tried to laugh it off. Some looked away. But the youngest voice had already asked the strongest question. And from that one moment, everything began to change. Because even though Zaloma had been treated like she didn't matter, Nico's voice reminded everyone that she did. And once you see someone you love eating from the trash, you can't unsee it. You can't stay silent. You can't pretend anymore. That one question opened old wounds, deep shame, and a story the whole family had tried to hide. But now, it was out, and the reunion would never be the same again. Long ago, Zaloma was the heart of her home. After her husband died suddenly, she was left with nothing but her son, Ifuno, who was still very young. Life was hard, but Zaloma never gave up. She woke up early every day, worked on people's farms under the hot sun, carried heavy loads on her back, and wove baskets late into the night just to earn a little money. Sometimes, when there was nothing left to sell, she even went from house to house, quietly begging for food or coins. Not for herself, but for her son. She believed in him more than anything in the world. She wanted him to become someone important, someone who would never have to suffer like she did. She skipped meals to pay his school fees. When he fell sick, she walked miles barefoot to get him herbs and medicine. She sold her favorite wrapper, the one her mother gave her, to buy his first school shoes. Every sacrifice she made was with love and without complaint. To her, Ifuno was worth everything. Years passed, and Zaloma's hard work paid off. Ifuno became successful. He started working in the city, earned big money, built a big house with many rooms, and married a beautiful woman. Zaloma was proud. She told everyone in the village, "That's my son. I knew he would make it." She thought she would finally rest, that she would live the rest of her life in peace, surrounded by the love she had planted. But when she moved into her son's new house, everything changed. Ifuno stopped calling her mama. To his friends and business partners, he introduced her as just the old woman from the village. He didn't talk about how she raised him or what she gave up. He spoke as if she had no history, no story. She had become an embarrassment, something he wanted to hide. He didn't let her stay in the main house. Instead, he moved her into the boys' quarters at the back, a small room behind the big compound, close to the gate. He said it was more comfortable for her, but Zaloma knew. She had become someone to keep out of sight, someone too poor, too rural, too simple for his new rich life. Zaloma didn't complain. She smiled when he passed by, thanked him when he brought her leftovers, and prayed quietly at night. But inside her, the pain grew, not because of the small room or the cold meals, but because the boy she gave everything for had forgotten who she really was. Not dead, just erased, slowly, silently, as if she never mattered. Bully never liked Zaloma. From the first day she entered the house, she made it clear. She didn't like the way Zaloma dressed, the way she talked, or even the way she smelled. She smells like poverty, Buli would whisper to her husband Ifuno, like palm oil, groundnuts, and that village sweat. And Ifuno, instead of defending his mother, would stay silent. Sometimes he even nodded. Zaloma noticed everything. The way Buli held her nose when she passed by, the way her food was always pushed aside. She cooked with love, using the same recipes she used when raising Ifuno. She roasted groundnuts for the children and fried ripe plantains just the way Ifuno used to love. But now her meals were never served. They were thrown in the bin before anyone could taste them. When guests visited, Buli would spray perfume around the house like it was fire, and before anyone knocked, she would run to Zaloma's room and lock it from outside. "Just stay inside, Mama," she'd say through the door. "We don't want too many people in the sitting room." But Zaloma knew the truth. She wasn't being hidden because of space. She was being hidden because of shame. She never shouted, never complained. She would sit in the corner of her small room, listening to the laughter from the living room, smelling the food she helped cook but would never eat. And then she would close her eyes and whisper to her late husband, "Do you see what your son has become?" She would say softly, "Let him remember who I was. Let him remember what I gave up for him." Her hands were rough, her feet cracked, but her heart was still full of love. Even when she was insulted, she didn't speak back. Even when Buli washed her clothes separately and told the maids not to enter her room, Zaloma said nothing. She would kneel at night and pray for the same family that treated her like a ghost. Buli would laugh with her friends about how the village woman didn't know how to use modern toilets, or how her wrappers smelled like bush smoke. She made jokes about how the children should stay away, or they would smell like the past. And Ifuno, he laughed too sometimes, and that hurt more than any insult. But Zaloma stayed calm. She kept her eyes down and her voice low, because deep inside, she believed something, that life turns, that truth never stays buried, that even though she was being treated like dirt now, one day, someone would see her again. And when that day comes, they would know she was never the problem. She was the root. The reason everything even grew. Kamsi used to be the sunshine in Zaloma's old eyes. As a little girl, she would run to her grandmother's room, sit on her lap, and listen to folktales late into the night. Zaloma would feed her roasted corn, braid her hair, and sing her lullabies. Kamsi would say, "Grandma, I'll never forget you. I'll always come back." Zaloma believed her. Years passed. Kamsi grew up, got a scholarship, and traveled abroad. She started working there, earning in foreign currency. The family celebrated her success. Everyone called her the star of the family. Zaloma prayed for her every single day, asking God to protect her, guide her, and keep her safe in the land of strangers. Then one day, Kamsi came home. The whole house buzzed with excitement. The compound was cleaned, decorations were hung, and a big meal was prepared. Kamsi stepped out of the car, wearing dark glasses, stylish clothes, and holding a fancy phone. She spoke in sharp, clipped English, the kind that didn't bend for elders. People smiled proudly. "She's now a proper lady," they said. Zaloma stood quietly in a corner, waiting. She thought Kamsi would run to her like before, hug her tightly, and say, "Grandma, I missed you." But Kamsi only walked past, gave a small wave, and said, "Hi," without even looking her in the eye. That evening, as everyone gathered to eat, Kamsi filled plates for the guests, her parents, and her cousins. Zaloma waited patiently. At the end, Kamsi picked the smallest plate, placed a cold portion of food on it, and handed it to her without a word. She didn't sit next to her. She didn't ask how she had been. "She'll understand," Kamsi told herself silently. "She's old. She won't mind." But Zaloma noticed everything. She noticed how Kamsi didn't call her grandma anymore, just a quiet ma. She noticed how her hugs were now quick and dry, not warm and tight like before. She noticed how her voice only softened when talking to outsiders, never to her. Zaloma didn't say anything. She just smiled gently and whispered in her heart, "So this is how it ends." She sat on her small stool, eating slowly, not because the food was cold, but because her heart was heavy. The little girl she raised with love, who once called her best friend, had returned as a stranger, not cruel, but distant, not angry, but ashamed. And Zaloma knew it wasn't because of hate. It was because of shame. The shame of being connected to someone poor, someone who didn't fit into Kamsi's new world. But in her silence, Zeloma forgave her, because sometimes love means watching someone forget you and still hoping one day they'll remember again. The family reunion was a big event. There were photographers, decorated chairs, and loud music. Everyone wore fine clothes and walked around with proud smiles. It wasn't really about love or togetherness. It was more about showing off who had succeeded, who had traveled abroad, who had built houses and bought cars. Everything was planned to look perfect. Every plate of food, every speech, every photo. But deep down, it was all for performance. Zeloma didn't know about the gathering until the last minute. She got her invitation not out of love, but because Booley believed that leaving out the old woman might bring bad luck. It won't look good if she's not there, Booley had whispered to Ifuno. So they told a maid to go call her and gave her an old wrapper to wear. No one offered to help her get dressed or asked if she was okay. She came quietly, sat in a corner, and said nothing. As the party went on, people walked past Zeloma without noticing her. No one asked for a photo with her. No one called her to the main table. Plates of food went around, but hers didn't come. Even the small children were too busy running around and taking selfies with their aunties and uncles. Zeloma watched it all quietly. She had lived through worse. Then, late in the afternoon, when the food was almost finished and guests were full, the servers started clearing the plates. Leftovers were packed into trash bags. The smells of fried yam, chicken bone, and jollof rice filled the air. Zeloma got up slowly and walked behind the big white tent. She didn't go there because she was starving. She went there because it had become a habit, to go where she wouldn't be seen, to find what others had thrown away. Years of being treated like she didn't matter had trained her feet to walk behind tents, behind doors, behind joy. She bent near the bin and picked out a few yam peels, carefully brushing off the sand. Her hands knew this routine, not because she wanted to eat trash, but because this was what her life had become. To everyone else, the reunion was a celebration, but for Zeloma, it was just another reminder of how far they had pushed her away. Her presence was not for love, it was for luck, for appearance, to tick a box. And when the cameras turned off, no one even asked if she had eaten. But even as she sat behind the tent with yam peels in her hand, Zeloma didn't cry. She simply sighed, looked up at the sky, and said nothing. Because when you've been invisible for too long, silence becomes your only voice. While the music played and people danced at the reunion, Nico, the youngest grandchild, was quietly looking for his grandma. He didn't care about the big decorations or fancy food. He just wanted to find the woman who used to sing him to sleep and tell him sweet village stories about the moon and the talking tortoise. He remembered her lap, her warm hands, and her soft voice better than anyone else. As he walked around the backyard, he saw something strange behind the tent. There, sitting close to a black bin, was Grandma Zeloma. She was picking out yam peels and putting them into her mouth slowly. Her wrapper was dusty, her feet bare, but her hands moved gently, like she had done this many times before. Nico stopped. His small heart didn't understand what was happening, but he knew something was wrong. He walked closer, confused, and asked softly, "Grandma, why are you eating from the bin?" His voice wasn't loud, but it carried power. It was pure, honest, and full of love. And somehow, through the music, through the laughter and noise, people heard him. The drumming stopped. Conversations went quiet. Heads turned. Plates were paused mid-air. "What did he say?" someone asked. "Who's eating from the bin?" another whispered. Then someone shouted, "Wait! Who let Mama Zeloma eat from the trash?" Suddenly, people were standing, looking, wondering. The woman they had walked past all day, the woman they didn't even greet, was now at the center of attention. Not because she wanted it, but because one little boy had asked a question that uncovered the truth. Nico didn't know he had started something. He just stood there, holding her hand, looking into her eyes. "Grandma, are you okay?" he asked again. Zeloma looked at him, her eyes full of tears she wouldn't let fall. She'd been invisible for so long that this moment felt strange. Someone had finally seen her. Someone remembered. And in that moment, the shiny surface of the reunion cracked. The fake smiles faded. The proud talks about success and travel and new houses became empty. Because how could they call themselves a proud family when their own mother, their own root, was eating from a trash bin? Nico's question, so simple yet so deep, woke up something in everyone's heart. Shame, regret, guilt, things they had pushed away for years. And now they couldn't look away. All it took was a small voice asking, "Why?" And just like that, The whole family had to face the truth. They had been hiding behind pretty clothes and proud speeches. Zaloma didn't cry, not when everyone turned to look at her, not when they whispered, not when shame filled the air like smoke. She didn't shout or hide her face. She just stood there, holding the little hand of Nico, and looked at them all, her children, her grandchildren, her in-laws, the neighbors who came to eat and laugh. And then, in a voice soft like wind, but strong like truth, she began to speak. She didn't speak to blame. She didn't speak to embarrass. She simply told the truth. She told them how she once had only 2 wrappers, and how she sold one of them to pay for Ifuno's school fees. That wrapper had belonged to her mother. It had history. It had meaning, but she gave it up because her son needed to learn. She told them how, one cold night, Ifuno was burning with fever. No one had medicine. No one could help. So she tied him on her back and walked through the night. Not to one village, not 2. She walked through 4 villages, barefoot, knocking on doors, asking strangers for herbs to save her child's life. Her legs bled, her back ached, but she kept walking, because a mother doesn't stop when her child is dying. She spoke of how she used to wake up before the sun and go to the farms, how she carried baskets of cassava on her head, walked long distances to the market just to sell and bring money home, how every coin she earned, she saved for her son, for the future of the family. She looked at Ifuno as she spoke, but not with anger. Her eyes just asked, "Did you forget all of this?" She turned to Buli and gently said, "You say I smell like poverty, but it was this poverty that raised your husband, that built this home you now enjoy." Then she looked at the rest, Kamsi, the other grandchildren, the neighbors, and said, "I don't need pity. I don't need food. I just need you to remember that this family didn't start with fine clothes and foreign accents. It started with sweat, with prayers, with hunger, and me." One by one, people began to lower their heads. Even the wind seemed to grow still, because her words didn't scream, but they cut deep. No lies, no drama, just truth. Zaloma didn't cry, but her voice carried the weight of every tear she never shed, every sacrifice she never mentioned. And in that quiet space, filled with shocked hearts and silent mouths, her truth rose higher than any song sung that day. After Zaloma finished speaking, the silence was heavy. No one clapped, no one moved. They just stared at her, then at each other. The loud music that had filled the air minutes ago now felt far away. Shame walked across the gathering like a shadow. Buli opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her pride, her sharp tongue, her usual fake smiles, all disappeared. Her eyes were wide, her lips tight. She didn't know where to look. Everything she had said behind closed doors about Zaloma had now become public shame. The woman she mocked and pushed aside had just reminded the whole family who she really was. Kamsi stood beside her, her eyes glued to the floor. She didn't say anything. She didn't even try to defend herself. Deep inside, she knew she had failed. She had once promised to love her grandmother forever, but she got carried away by her new life, her new ways, her new pride. And now, her silence was louder than any speech. Ifuno, trying to save face, gave a small laugh. "Mama likes drama," he said lightly, hoping someone would laugh along with him, but no one did. His words fell to the ground, empty and cold. The elders who sat at the back of the compound started whispering among themselves. One of them, a man who had known Zaloma since she was young, shook his head slowly. "Your mother eats from the bin, and you wear gold," he whispered, not just to Ifuno but loud enough for others to hear. Another old woman said, "This family eats meat today because she once drank only water, and now she's treated like a stray dog." Someone else added, "Your father gave us land through this woman's hands. She carried your future on her head like a basket, and this is how you repay her." One by one, the proud heads began to fall. They couldn't hide behind their clothes or makeup or big cars. Not anymore. The truth had arrived, and it didn't knock. It simply entered and sat in the middle of them all. People who once smiled at Buli looked away. Those who praised Ifuno began to frown. Even the maids stood still, watching, understanding for the first time who truly carried the weight of this family. Zaloma didn't look angry. She just stood calmly, as if she had been waiting for this moment for a long time. She didn't need to say anything else. Her silence had already won. That day, at a party meant to show off success, it was. The decorations or food people remembered. It was a mother's quiet pain, a grandmother's strength, and the shame that fell on the heads of those who had forgotten where they came from. Nico, the youngest of them all, didn't care about the shame, the whispers, or the awkward silence hanging in the air. He didn't look around to see what others were thinking. He just walked over to his grandmother, slowly, gently, like someone walking towards something precious. Zaloma was still sitting near the bin, her hands resting on her lap, her eyes quiet but tired. No one else moved, but Nico did. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't wait for approval. He simply knelt beside her, right there on the dusty ground, where no one wanted to be seen. Without saying much, he took her hand in his, small hand, holding an old, wrinkled one. He smiled softly and then sat down beside her, not caring that his clothes would get dirty. He opened his plate of food and broke a piece, offering it to her. "Eat with me, Grandma," he said, not loudly, not for attention, just enough for her to hear. Zaloma looked at him. At first, she didn't move. Maybe she thought it was a dream. No one had invited her to eat in a long time, not like this. But when she saw Nico's eyes, so honest, so full of love, something melted inside her. She smiled back, a small, fragile smile, and she took the food. They ate together in silence. Not like strangers, not like charity, like family, like love. Everyone else just watched. No one had done that. Not Buli, not Kamsi, not even Ifuno. They had forgotten. But this child remembered. He didn't need a reason. He didn't act out of pity. He did it out of love, pure, real love. There were no cameras, no phones, no loud music, no announcements. But that picture, Nico, sitting on the ground with his grandmother, sharing his food, burned into the minds of everyone who saw it. It was quiet, but powerful, gentle, but louder than any speech. That image said more than all the proud words the family had said during the reunion. People began to shift in their seats. Some looked away, feeling small. Others began to remember all the times Zaloma had helped raise them, prayed for them, stayed up late when they were sick, gave up her own meals so they could eat. But it was Nico, the youngest, who reminded them all of what love really looked like. Not in gold chains, not in fake smiles or planned speeches, but in small hands, sitting on the ground, sharing food with someone the world had pushed aside. And in that simple moment, Nico didn't just feed his grandmother. He fed something in everyone's heart that they didn't even know was starving. The reunion ended quietly. There were no more loud speeches, no dancing, no fake smiles. People left with heavy hearts and quiet thoughts. But Zaloma didn't return to the house. She didn't want their late apologies or their sudden guilt. She had spent years waiting for love and respect that never came. Now, she didn't need it anymore. She packed only what belonged to her, just a few clothes, a framed photo, and her favorite cooking spoon. Then she returned to her old village, the one where her story began. A place without tiles or fancy chairs, but full of peace. She cleaned her small mud house, swept the compound, and started planting again. Her hands, though tired, still knew how to work the land. Slowly, her little farm came alive again, with tomatoes, okra, yams, everything fresh, everything hers. She lived simply but proudly. She didn't chase luxury. She didn't look back. And one day, Nico came to visit. He came running up the path, dusty and smiling, holding a small basket of oranges he picked on the way. Zaloma saw him, and her eyes lit up, not with surprise, but with peace, like she had been waiting for him all along. They sat under the mango tree, where she used to tell him stories as a baby. She made him food with her own hands, hot, soft pounded yam and pepper soup. They ate together, just like they did that day at the reunion. After eating, Zaloma looked at him gently and said, "Not all wounds want healing, my son. Some just want to be remembered." Nico didn't ask her to explain. He understood. Sometimes, saying sorry isn't enough. Sometimes, pain just wants to be honored, to not be forgotten. He nodded, and he remembered everything. Her songs, her stories, her strength, how she once had nothing, yet gave everything. And from that day on, he told her story everywhere he went. Not for pity, but so people would never forget that behind every proud family is often one quiet, forgotten woman who carried them all. And sometimes, that woman doesn't want your tears. She just wants her truth to be known. That was Zaloma's legacy. Not the house she left, not the people who failed her, but the heart she built in a child who never forgot her. If this story touched your heart, Share it with someone who still remembers their grandmother's hands.